Hello, second grade. So today we are going to do our September ELPD. And when I had talked to you guys about possibly topics to discuss, you mentioned newcomers and then kind of writing time. And I added that into what we were talking about earlier and with kind of some of the students during writing time. So that's why I added that to the PD for September. So we will get started. All right, so when we think about our newcomers, we need to think about what are the stages of language acquisition. So the very first stage for our newcomers is that very silent receptive stage. This could last several hours up to several months. It just really depends on the type of student that they are and how they are coming to us. So it's one of those stages that is very hard for us to kind of I know for me, it's hard for me to be patient with it sometimes and to realize that it can last, that most of our kids, it's not several hours, it's usually several weeks or even months. And when I think of our newcomers that started last year and are now in first, second, and third, they are just now leaving that kind of silent receptive stage. So it's something that we do need to honor, because when we think about the situation that they're in, it's very, very different. This is where they are just taking it all in, which is why we want to immerse them in all sorts of language in our classrooms. That second stage is that early production. And this can last up, when I think of those kiddos now, this is where they are. They're in that early production stage. They've acquired up to about 1,000 words in the English language, and they speak either single words or very short phrases. They're not even really complete sentences yet, but that is the next stage of progression in language acquisition. Then we move to that speech emergence. Now's where they have about 3,000 words. They can communicate. And I do see our three boys, I see some of them here, like especially Anthony in Miss Pompey's class. I definitely see him really diving into this stage. I think he transitioned very quickly to that speech emergence stage this year. This is where they start to gain that greater comprehension, and they're ready to read and write in that second language. It's not going to look like a native language speaker's reading or writing, but they're ready. They are ready for that basic level of reading and writing in English. Then we move on to that intermediate fluency, and that can last up to a year or more. So this is where a lot of our newcomers, like when they actually get to that phase, sometimes they stay for a short while in that speech emergence, and then we kind of get up to this one, that intermediate. So now their vocab has increased to like 6,000. They're using more complex sentences. I think of Janet Alanis in 5th grade. This is exactly where she is. Like she has acquired the language very quickly. She is writing very comparable to native language speakers, and her speech is more fluent as well. And this is where they actually kind of start thinking in their second language, which leads to more proficiency. That's why we always say we want them to be so proficient and fluent in their first language that they don't have to make that transfer anymore. When they get to this intermediate fluency, they're actually starting to think in that second language too, because they've made that connection with their native language. And then we have that final advanced fluency, and this can take at least 2 years to reach this stage, and then it can be 10 years before they reach full mastery in it. So this is why, as teachers and looking at data and wanting to reach goals, especially our grade level goals, this is where with newcomers it's very hard to be patient. And believe me, like, I totally get it, but this is that advanced fluency stage. It takes a while to get to, and we kind of have to push our newcomers, but we also have to honor the stages at which they're in. Up in the corner is a newcomer toolkit from the DOE, and it just has a lot of different kind of history about newcomers, that progression of newcomers, as well as like just how you can help your newcomers in the classroom. So I linked that there if you're interested. Like I said, it's not necessarily something that you would use on a daily basis, but it's something that's nice to look at because it gives you an idea of where those newcomers are coming from, and it actually describes those stages that I went through in a little bit more detail. And of course, the internet is so slow today that it's not loading very quickly. But it has some good ideas for, I remember learning about this when I got my licensure about newcomers and things to do. So it just has a lot of ideas and explains just a lot about our newcomers and kind of the process that they're going through and how we can first make them feel safe and loved in our environment, and then how we can push them. So that's there for you if you want to look at it. All right, so moving on, we go to how can we help them? Well, this is, again, remember, it's a process. So here are some ideas with our newcomers. Newcomers as well as some of our level 1 ESL learners. First of all, make it visual. They need to see. They do not understand the language. They are trying to take in everything that's going on in the classroom. If everything is only oral and they're just hearing you say it and they don't understand it, it's not making any connection with them. So we need everything to be visual. Just like we say with our level 1 and 2 ESLs, same thing, newcomers need visuals like crazy. Reach out, that's what I'm here for. I'm more than willing to help you come up with some ideas to find time that I can meet with your newcomers. At Pompey's at the end of the day, I take from 2:30 to 3 and we work on different just basic communication things together, and starting just at that basic level with lots and lots of visuals. But reach out to me, I'm here to help however I can. Pre-teach, so anytime you're getting ready to do kind of like a big unit, all of those visual cards that I've made are great to use with your students. If you're going to start talking about something, to really pre-teach those words. If you're going to talk about fairy tales coming up for reading, really pre-teach a lot of that through books, through those visual cards, and so that they have an understanding already before you get into that core content of the topic. Build in more group work. I know that this is so hard this year just because of circumstances and the situation, but group work is very important for our newcomers, and we want to pair them. Yes, we can pair them with native language speakers because they're going to learn from that language, but it's also nice to pair them with somebody that can translate. However, we don't want that to become a crutch. We don't want that to become a crutch for the newcomer, and we also don't want the language speaker, the higher language speaker that is translating, we don't want them to just become the teacher all the time. So it's kind of a fine line, but yet we have to have that peer that can help, and then peers that can help. And mainly where they're just going to be inundated with language. That peer buddy that I was just talking about, finding somebody who can help translate some of those things, not everything, but those important things that you want them to understand. A peer buddy is great for that. So if I need my newcomer to understand that we do this and then we do this, or it's very important that, or here's where we keep our pencils in the room, here's what we do when we're done writing, that's something that a peer buddy can explain in Spanish, but then also we want to build in that English to help the newcomer learn. One-on-one, anytime you can give newcomers that one-on-one attention, that's very beneficial for them. They need that time with just the teacher. I know it's hard to do every single day with a room full of 20-some students, but any of that one-on-one time that you can give them is going to be vital to helping them learn the language. It doesn't mean that you need to spend all of your time with them. You need to get around to all of your students, but just really understanding, like during writing time, especially, I tell teachers, like, I always make sure I get around to my newcomers to touch base each day with what they're doing and just to have that quick little conversation with them. Sentence frames. Sentence frames are so important for newcomers, even if it's just an oral sentence frame. They don't have to write it, but just to get them practicing, like, how are you? So a sentence frame, I am, and then fine with a happy face, sad with a sad face, mad with an angry face. So really just making it visual, but also making them practice that in their language, in the English language. One thing I do a lot with newcomers when I am able to kind of just pull them down here is I will have the a sentence frame in Spanish and in English so they can start to make that connection. with one of Miss Pompey's students, Stephanie. We were doing colors yesterday, and so I wanted her to practice the frame, this is red, this is black. So she wasn't getting the colors yet, but she could start to practice that oral sentence frame, this is. And it was just something that we kept working on and pointing to it. I know that if I went to get her today, she's not going to remember it, but it's still that practice and that repetition, giving her that frame to follow. Scaffold with that native language, just like I said, making sure that she understands, okay, here's how you say it in Spanish, here's how we say it in English. Every day when we're walking down to my room, I will say, how are you? I will say it in Spanish. When she replies, bien, I make sure I say good or fine in English, so she knows that ¿Cómo estás? Means how are you? Bien fine means how are you? I'm fine, I'm good. So just helping her make those connections with her native language and then her second language. But giving them the both languages, I have like those labels to label your stuff in the room in both languages. That's very important, especially for newcomers that are fluent. Now, when we get little newcomers, they might not always be able to read in Spanish, but sometimes they know how to say the word. So I know just when Stephanie lines up each day, I have the trash can label right by the trash can by the door. So she always says it in Spanish. I don't think she can read it, but she knows what it's called. And then so Anthony then, who comes with her, will say trash can. And so it's just really just continuing to immerse her in language. And finally, the hardest one I know is to honor that silent period. If you think about us going to a foreign country right now and sitting in a school where they don't speak any English, we're going to be pretty silent because we don't understand what is going on. We're taking it all in. We're probably a little scared. And that's kind of how our newcomers feel. It is very nice that we have pretty much all one second language here, or all one native language for our newcomers, which is Spanish. So they do have each other, but we have to honor that silent period. And yes, we can continue to push it. We want to work with them. But when I think of some of our newcomers, they're definitely not ready to write a paragraph in English. And even having them copy that is not going to be that much help. We have to walk her through the phases that she's in for language acquisition. So one of the best things that we can do for our newcomers is just to immerse them in the language of the classroom. They need exposure, they need experiences, they need to be hearing the language, seeing the language, practicing the language, all of that receptive, and then leading to the productive, listening first, but then also, which is the receptive, but then also using that productive, which is saying the language too. So just really that exposure and immersion, they're picking up more than they're producing. So when I think of all of our newcomers here at Suncrest, they're getting the language. They are being exposed to the language. They are being immersed in the language. They're just not producing it yet. So we also want to encourage them to continue at home reading in Spanish, talking in Spanish, writing in Spanish if that's what they do, because it's going to help them grow more quickly in their second language as well. All right, so that is all about newcomers. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask me about newcomers. And I know at one time we've all had newcomers, and hopefully they continue to come to Suncrest, because I think that they're some of the funnest kids to work with. But we're going to move on to kind of writing workshop right now. I know one of the things that we talked about in kind of the survey that I asked you guys about was kids picking their own topics instead of copying from a book. I think, again, that's just getting used to things. And I think we've kind of nipped that in the bud just with talking to them and showing them our own books. Like, oh, you're doing a really good job with these Scaredy Squirrel books or Elephant and Piggy books, but you know what? You can write another book and you can make it up. So I think we're doing really well with that. Another one that came up was kind of that attention and focus, and and that's more of kind of a probably a management structure thing. rather than just an EL thing, but we'll touch on that in just some of the things with writing workshops. So our ELs in writing, just a few things to remember. Many of our ELs still have that low language proficiency level in writing. So they might be higher overall, but they still have a low score in writing. So that's why it's very important to look at those scores, because when they have the low scores, we still need to scaffold for those learners. We need to scaffold in writing based on their writing scores, as well as based on need. So when we look at our students, here's our second grade list of EL students and their scores. So we have, I have them broken apart by class, so Claxton's, Pages, and Pompey's. We have their overall scores and then their writing score. So as you can see, some of them, there's a huge difference. When I look at Emily in Mrs. Claxton's room, she's a 3.4 overall, but she just made it to level 2 in writing. So that's still a very low level writer. Same with Abdiel. So I would scaffold much differently for a 2.0 than I would for a 3.4. So that's why it's very important to look at those individualized writing scores as well. We can look over now. Maria in Paige's room, still very close. So she still needs kind of those scaffolds across the board. Jason Cruz is another one. So he's a 3.6. He's closer to a 4 than he is to a 3, but in writing, he's a 2.5. And I think we'll see him grow a ton this year because he's already doing an amazing job. But that's why, just thinking about our writers, that's why it is so important for us to look at the individualized scores rather than just the overall. Michael in Miss Pompey's room is a great example too. He's a level 4 overall, but he is a level 2.8 in writing. So that shows that he still needs a lot of scaffolds in writing in order to be successful. So I know I am totally guilty when we get our scores of looking right at that overall score and, oh yay, Michael is a 4. And then when I go to teach him writing, I have to remember I need to scaffold for a level 2, not a level 4, because he's not at a level 4 in writing yet. Now, I would probably start scaffolding Michael at what level 3 writers can do, because obviously I want to move him up. But the importance of looking at those individualized scores. So kind of what do our EL writers need? These are so important. And I think a lot of having these also helps with that classroom management too, because one of the things with our ELs is if they're confused and they're lost, that's when management becomes an issue. So first of all, word walls. Word walls need to be visible. They need to be easily accessible, and that's why I say on your wall. Because when you have a student that has trouble focusing, it's very hard for them to do multiple things. So if I have word wall words on a chart in their desk, now I need my student who's already having trouble focusing, who is in the midst of the writing process, needs to know a word. Now they have to stop that process of writing, dig into their desk to find something, try to find the word on there, and now try to take it back to this paper while everything else is on my desk and out, and then put it down on the writing paper or the writing book. That's why word walls on the wall are so much easier, because you can actually visually teach from those. You can talk through them together as you add them on there. The ones that I have in my room are just laminated papers with the letters on them. That way I can write right on the paper when we come across a word, instead of having to write it on a sentence frame, tape it up there. And I will gladly make those for your room if you want me to, just ask me. But then the biggest thing with the word wall is we have to hold them accountable. It's hard to hold them accountable when it's something that they have to find and that they have to get out and that they have to locate. If they can just easily turn their head and look, or look up and see it, that's when we can totally hold them accountable. That is on the word wall. Look to your left, find the word, and I expect you to have it spelled correctly. They also need consistency and routine. So that's why we always stress to practice those routines and keep them consistent. During writing time, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is what we do. 1, 2, 3. And that's it. There's no, we stray from that at times, but we need to hold them accountable for that. So we know where our supplies are. We know during writing time it's quiet. We don't bother the teacher. The teacher is conferring with others. We leave her alone. We know where our materials are. If we finish a book, we know what to do with it. Having those visually on a chart, step by step, helps our students so much. And again, accountability for that. So sometimes when I'm in rooms and I'll see a student get up in the middle of writing time, I will just say, oh, why are we up? We don't get up during writing time. Sit back down. And it's just really holding them accountable to do that. A lot of our ELs in writing need that oral rehearsal, just letting them talk it out first. So what are you going to write about? Tell me what's going to happen next. It's surprising that productive language is very hard for our students. They know in their mind what is going to happen, but it's hard for them to get it out. So we need to really encourage that with our ELs. Don't save them and try to guess what's going to happen next, but have them produce that language. Then you can ask them questions about it so they know, oh, I need to kind of fix that because it didn't make sense. But that oral rehearsal stage is very important for our students. That focused mini lesson, keep that mini lesson short and sweet. So it's clear. Here's our focus for today. We are going to work on personal narratives. It is a story about you. Who is it a story about? And having them repeat it. Then here's my example, or here's my quick read aloud. And then I'm going to give them something to work on. So today in our writing, you guys are going to be making a story about you. In my third grade today, our mini lesson was on punctuation. That's what I want you to work on today in your story. Keeping that mini lesson very short, sweet, clear is so important. If we give our ELs too much, we start to lose them. They're remembering, think about where those writers are. They're remembering just small chunks. And then that share time is so important. I know it's the easiest thing to skip because you get busy conferring with students and that conferring time goes so well. But this is the time when they learn from others. When you show off a book in front of the class that one of your students wrote, all of your kids are going to try that. They're dying to get their book up there too, even though we're not doing it by who has the best book. But that's the best way for some of our students to learn, especially our ELs. I think back to one in Paige's class, we were having a student share and he had made up an original story, which is why we had him share, so that because we were getting so many Elephant and Piggie books at the very beginning and we wanted them to come up with original ideas, so we had him share his story. The very next day, one of our students that was really having trouble coming up with his own story started writing his own story. So we have to have that share time. It's also a great time for them to practice speaking and answering questions from others, or answering questions from you. Hey, what's going to happen next in your story? Or what are you going to write about in your next one? So just really getting that language out. That importance of conferring time, it's beneficial for you. It's beneficial for them. It shows you where they are as writers. It allows that conversation one-on-one with an EL. It helps them feel safe. It's just you and them. And it's a time for them to discuss goals with you and you to discuss goals with them to help them better understand. For them, that is a time where they feel so valued as a writer. Even though their writing might not be as good as others, we don't want them to ever think that. So it allows for a time for them to be comfortable, to practice speaking if they might be nervous, whole class. It allows them time to talk about what they're having trouble with and to help them understand what they need to do next. And the biggest thing is it helps them view themselves as a writer. I'm not just going around to certain students or the good writers, or I'm not just having the good writers share their story. I'm having everyone share. I'm talking to everyone. We can all learn from each other. So that conferring time is very, very, very important. All right, so short and sweet PD. As always, reach out for anything that you guys need or any questions you have about your ELLs. And for the PD today, if you will just fill out this Google form, it just has a few questions. And please be very, very honest. It helps me. But kind of what are the, it's about newcomers, it's about writing, things that you think are going well, things that you want to try, anything you need from me. Just fill that out, and that way I'll kind of have that compliance thing for attendance as well for ELPDs. But thank you so much. And if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Thank you, second grade.